Welcome to Silent Secrets, a place where every quiet corner hides a story, every shadow whispers a secret, and every mystery is waiting for you to uncover it. Grab a seat, stay a while, and let the secrets begin. Chapter 1. Arrival at the Larkspur Fair. The train slid into Larkspur Station with a sigh of brakes and a burst of steam that drifted lazily through the cool evening air. It was a modest stop, a single platform, weathered boards, and a station house whose roof sagged slightly with age. Yet Hercule Poirot stepped onto it with the same poise and dignity he carried into grand hotels and glittering city halls. He paused a moment, observing the scene with keen, deliberate eyes. A pair of porters bickered over a trolley stacked with crates. A young mother shepherded her children toward the exit. Beyond the platform lay a quiet stretch of road that curved toward the heart of the town. Larkspur was precisely the sort of place, Poirot reflected, that seemed unsusceptible to intrigue. A small settlement nestled in the countryside, untouched by haste. And yet he had learned long ago that tranquility often concealed its own shadows. It was not a case that had drawn him here, however, but a personal curiosity. Word had reached him of the long-vanished Larkspur Traveling Fair, a century-old attraction that had returned after years of absence. It was said to be steeped in history and threaded with secrets, though the gossip was vague and contradictory. The primary marvel, the tale went, was a certain carousel unlike any other, a wonder called the Sapphire Carousel. The name alone intrigued him. Poirot was a man who appreciated artistry and craftsmanship. To hear that the carousel had been carved by Rowan Hale, a master artisan whose work was whispered about in collector circles, had only strengthened his resolve to see it for himself. Thus, he had accepted the invitation sent by the fair's current owner, Martha Keating, who had written to him in hopes that his presence might help revive the fair's dwindling reputation. The walk from the station was short. As Poirot approached the fairgrounds, set in an open field at the edge of town, he heard the distant hum of generators, mingled with the faint strains of carnival music. Strings of lights twinkled overhead like captured stars. Booths stood in neat rows, each adorned with hand-painted signs promising delights and simple amusements. A Ferris wheel turned slowly, its silhouette etched against the dusky sky. Yet despite the color and glow, there was a muted quality to the atmosphere. As though the fair had not yet found its full voice, Martha Keating met him near the entrance, flanked by two workers adjusting a banner that fluttered in the breeze. She was a brisk, sturdy woman with silver-shot hair and an expression that suggested she had weathered many storms, personal and professional alike. But she smiled warmly as she approached. "Mr. Poirot," she said, extending her hand. "I can't tell you what an honor it is to have you here. I hope the journey was agreeable." "Most agreeable, madam," Poirot replied, inclining his head. "I thank you for your invitation. Your fair is renowned, even to those who have never had the pleasure of attending it." A hint of pride softened her features, though she tried to hide it. "We do our best. Larkspur has been waiting a long time for the fair's return. I only hope we can give them something worthy of the legacy." Poirot's gaze swept over the grounds once more. "You have undertaken a most ambitious revival, I see. And the Sapphire Carousel, it is as exquisite as they say?" Her expression changed subtly, shadowed, just for a moment. "Exquisite, yes, though worn. Time has not been kind to it. Rowan Hale has been refinishing it piece by piece for the last several months. A perfectionist, as you might expect from an artisan of his skill. I look forward to speaking with him." Martha hesitated. "He can be private, but he respects brilliance, and I imagine he will enjoy meeting someone of your reputation." Poirot smiled gently, for he had met many like Rowan Hale, artists whose passion for creation was matched only by their protectiveness of their work. They walked deeper into the fair. Workers hurried past, hoisting cables, hammering stakes, adjusting lights. The air crackled with pre-show tension. Poirot noted details as he went. The uneven wear on certain booth signs, the faint scorch marks near a generator, the way a group of performers whispered heatedly among themselves until they saw Martha, at which point they fell abruptly silent. When they reached the center of the fair, the Sapphire Carousel came into view, bathed in the soft glow of lanterns hung from the surrounding posts. Poirot stopped in his tracks. Even at a distance, the carousel was magnificent. The structure rose like a jewel-studded crown, carved from polished woods and adorned with intricate inlays of blue glass. The horses, each frozen in a lamp pose, were painted in deep hues that shimmered under the lights. Some bore saddles set with turquoise-like stones. Others had manes carved with swirling patterns that caught and scattered the glow. But what struck Poirot most was the craftsmanship. Every detail bore the unmistakable touch of a master artisan, precise, imaginative, alive with character. "Remarkable," he murmured. "Rowan has been working on it since dawn," Martha said. "He's preparing it for tonight's grand reveal." A tall man stepped out from behind the carousel, wiping his hands on a cloth. His hair was dark and slightly disheveled, and there was a guarded quality in his eyes. Rowan Hale was not a young man, though the vigor in his movements suggested he had refused to make peace with age. His gaze fell on Poirot with a mixture of curiosity and faint irritation. "You must be the detective," he said, stepping forward. The one Martha invited to lend the affair an air of sophistication. Poirot raised an eyebrow. "I was not aware that my presence served as decoration." A glimmer of amusement broke through Rowan's stern facade. "Forgive me. I've been immersed in this project for days. Social graces escape me when I'm working." Martha introduced them formally, though Rowan seemed to appraise Poirot more than greet him. "Your creation is extraordinary," Poirot said. "A harmony of structure and artistry." Rowan's eyes lit with pride. "It is the culmination of 30 years of work. Not continuous, mind you. The carousel has traveled, been damaged, forgotten, rediscovered. But I've done what I could to restore it. Tonight's unveiling will be the first time it has run properly in decades." Poirot studied him. There was admiration in Rowan's voice, but also something else, a strain beneath the words. "Oh, wait, and everything is in order?" Poirot asked. "No difficulties?" Rowan hesitated. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. "There have been complications, old mechanisms failing, lighting issues. Nothing we can't handle." His jaw tightened. "Some members of the staff complain that the carousel is cursed." "Superstitious nonsense." "Superstition often masks real concerns," Poirot said quietly. Before Rowan could respond, a burst of laughter erupted from a nearby booth, followed by the crack of a whipped curtain. Evening was settling in, and the fair was preparing for the first wave of visitors. Workers rushed to finalize their tasks. Rowan excused himself, muttering about the final inspection he needed to conduct. Martha watched him go, her expression troubled. "He's been under tremendous pressure," she said. "The fair's success depends on the carousel, or so everyone believes. Rowan feels every expectation as though it were carved into him." Poirot nodded, sensing the unspoken worry under her tone. An hour later, the sun had fully set. Lights flickered on across the fairgrounds, illuminating the pathways in warm shades of gold. The music grew louder, more vibrant. Crowds began to gather at the gates, drifting toward the attractions like moths toward flame. Poirot lingered near the carousel, admiring its glowing beauty. At precisely 8 o'clock, a small crowd assembled for the unveiling, but Rowan Hale did not appear. After a few minutes of hushed confusion, Martha signaled to one of the crew members to fetch him. The man jogged toward the back of the structure, and moments later, a shout split the air. Poirot moved swiftly. Martha closed behind him. They rounded the carousel to find Rowan slumped beside the steps, his body twisted awkwardly. His right hand clutched a sharp fragment of deep blue glass, unmistakably from the carousel's inlays. His skin was pale, unnaturally so, and his chest did not rise. Martha gasped. "No, Rowan." Workers gathered, murmuring in shock and fear. Poirot knelt beside the body, noting every detail. The fragment gripped tightly, the faint bruise forming on Rowan's temple, the unnatural stillness of his features. He placed a gentle hand above Rowan's wrist, feeling for a pulse he already knew was absent. "This is terrible," Martha whispered. "He must have slipped on the steps or stumbled while fixing something. A tragic accident." Poirot looked up at her, his expression calm but grave. "Madam," he said softly, "accidents seldom hold broken clues." He lifted the shard of blue glass from Rowan's stiff fingers and studied its jagged edge. Its presence was wrong, not merely out of place, but purposeful. A hush fell over the gathered crowd as Poirot rose to his feet. "Something here," he murmured, "does not align." The fair's music continued to play, bright, melodic, oblivious, as the shadows deepened around them. And thus, the mystery of the Sapphire Carousel began. Chapter 2. Whispers beneath the lanterns. Lanterns glowed softly across the fairgrounds, their light swaying gently in the evening breeze, as if whispering secrets to the shadows. The laughter and music that had filled the air earlier had faded, replaced by low murmurs from clusters of workers and townsfolk who lingered anxiously at the edges of the scene. A thin rope had been hastily tied around the Sapphire Carousel, creating a boundary that no one dared cross except Hercule Poirot and a few trusted members of the fair. Rowan Hale's body had been respectfully moved to a sheltered tent, and the local constable had arrived, though he stood awkwardly on the perimeter, clearly unsure how to proceed in the presence of the famed detective. Poirot, however, paid him little attention for the moment. His mind was already stirred by patterns, half-seen shapes forming among the facts. Awaiting clarity, he surveyed the carousel's base once more, noting the delicate carvings, the missing fragment where the blue glass had been torn from its inlay, and the faint traces of dust disturbed on the lower steps. Not a fall, Poirot thought. Not something so simple. There had been intention here, concealed beneath the beauty of the fair's centerpiece. With a final glance at the scene, he turned to the first of his interviews, Lily Grant. The devoted apprentice Lily Grant waited near one of the lantern poles, twisting a handkerchief between trembling fingers. She was a slim young woman, barely in her 20s, with a quiet intensity in her eyes that suggested both intelligence and deep loyalty. When Poirot approached, she straightened, attempting to mask her distress. "Miss Grant," Poirot said gently, "I understand you were Mr. Hale's apprentice." "Yes," she replied, her voice tight. "I studied under him for nearly 4 years. He was brilliant. Difficult at times, but always fair." Poirot regarded her thoughtfully. "You worked closely with him. Did you observe anything unusual in his behavior this past week?" She hesitated, then nodded. He became increasingly focused on the central horse, the one he called Aurora. He said it was the heart of the carousel. "I assisted where I could, but he often worked alone late into the night." "Did he tell you why he wished to restore Aurora with such urgency?" A flush crossed Lily's cheeks. "He said he must finish it before the unveiling. That it mattered more than anything else. I thought it was simply his perfectionism, but now—" A voice wavered. "I don't know." Poirot placed a comforting hand on the railing beside her, careful not to touch her. "You have lost a mentor, mademoiselle. That is no small grief. Still, there is another matter. Tell me, had Mr. Hawley any enemies in the fair?" "Oh no," she said quickly, too quickly. Poirot noted the hesitation that followed. "Not enemies. But he did argue with Carl several times this week." "Carl Murdoch," Poirot repeated. "The handyman." Lily's expression tightened. "He has always resented how much care Rowan put into the carousel. Carl prefers quick fixes, patches, instead of proper restoration. Rowan hated that. And the tension? You noticed it?" "Of course," Lily said quietly. "Everyone did." Poirot thanked her and let her step away, though he filed away the tremor in her voice when Carl's name had been spoken. Carl Murdoch. The suspicious handyman Carl Murdoch stood near the generator shed, arms crossed, jaw clenched so tightly that the muscles twitched beneath his stubble. He was a broad-shouldered man with calloused hands and a restless gaze. When Poirot approached, Carl's posture stiffened. "You wanted to see me," Carl said in a low, wary tone. Poirot studied him calmly. "You worked with Mr. Hawley on the maintenance of the carousel." "Worked near him," Carl corrected. "He didn't exactly invite help." Poirot inclined his head. "Did that trouble you?" Carl scoffed. "Look, everyone worshipped Rowan like some sort of living legend. But he wasn't easy. He threw a fit if a bolt was tightened half a turn too much. I respected the craft, sure, but I don't play sycophant. Poirot found the honesty, or the appearance of it, intriguing. I am told the two of you argued. Carl's jaw flexed. We disagreed. He accused me of carelessness. Maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. Doesn't mean I killed him. Poirot did not react to the defensive tone. Tell me, Mr. Murdoch, what do you know of the restoration he was doing on the central horse? Carl shifted uneasily. Nothing I need to know. It was his project. Yet you looked away, Poirot said quietly, when the sapphire horse was mentioned earlier. Carl's gaze flicked sharply to the detective. What are you implying? I suggest nothing, monsieur. I merely observe. For a moment, Carl's composure wavered. His eyes darted briefly toward the covered tent where Rowan's body lay, then back to the carousel. That thing has always given me the creeps, he muttered. The way people talk about it as if it's alive. Rowan believed there was some secret embedded in it, some legacy from the original builders. Foolish talk. And yet, Poirot said softly, secrets often exist where we least expect them. Carl scowled, clearly eager to end the conversation. Poirot dismissed him with a polite nod, though his suspicions deepened. Carl's reactions had been too quick, too sharp. Fear, Poirot thought, not guilt, though fear could be just as dangerous. Jonah Pike, the unhurried ticket keeper, Jonah Pike, was the polar opposite of Carl. Thin, slow-moving, and unruffled by nature, he sat on a wooden stool near the ticket booth, smoking a pipe with the air of a man who viewed life as a series of small, manageable inconveniences. He removed the pipe from his mouth as Poirot approached. "Evening, sir," he said mildly. "You're the detective, I gather." "I am," Poirot replied, taking a seat beside the man. "Tell me, Mr. Pike, you have been with the fair for many years?" 24, Jonah said. "Long enough to see it fall apart and rise again. Long enough to know trouble when it comes knocking." "And this is trouble?" Jonah blew out a slow stream of smoke. "Death always is. Poor Rowan, not a man I'd share a drink with. Too intense. But he didn't deserve that end." Poirot nodded. "What did you observe tonight?" "Not much. I stay near the gates until the crowd settles. But I'll say this. Rowan was on edge all week. Kept muttering to himself. Kept checking behind him as though expecting someone." Poirot leaned forward slightly. "You noticed that?" "Hard to miss. Man paced like a caged fox. Something was eating at him. Something related to the carousel?" Jonah shrugged. "Seems likely. He barely slept. And everyone's whispering about the central horse, though I don't buy into the tailies." Poirot waited a moment before asking, "Mr. Pike, do you know if Rowan suspected someone of wrongdoing?" Jonah hesitated, then gestured subtly toward Martha Keating, who stood a distance away, speaking with the constable. "Martha would know," he said. "Rowan spoke to her this morning. They argued, quietly but with purpose. She hasn't been herself since." Poirot turned his head slightly, observing Martha. Her gestures were slow, her expression weighted. Something troubled her beyond grief. He thanked Jonah and rose. Confession. Under the lanterns, Martha Keating did not resist when Poirot approached. Her shoulders sagged, and she exhaled with weary resignation. "You've spoken with them," she said softly. "Yes, and now I must speak with you." They moved to a quieter corner of the fairgrounds, where the lanterns cast long shadows across the grass. "This morning," Poirot began, "Rowan spoke to you. What was the nature of the conversation?" Martha closed her eyes briefly. "He came to me in a state of agitation. He said he had found proof, concrete proof, that someone had been stealing from the revenue chests. The ones we lock in the main office each night. I asked him to explain, but he said he needed to verify something first. He wouldn't give details. Yet he intended to confront the person responsible? Yes, he said he would handle it discreetly. I trusted him." Her voice faltered. "I didn't imagine he was in danger." Poirot folded his hands, absorbing the information. "Did he name a suspect?" "No," Martha said. "But he implied it was someone within the staff. Someone he did not wish to accuse until he had absolute proof." Poirot's gaze shifted toward the carousel. where its central horse gleamed faintly beneath the lantern light. "And this proof," he said quietly. "You believe he found it inside the carousel?" Martha looked startled. "Inside it? No, I hadn't considered that possibility." Poirot's voice softened. Rowan spent days obsessively restoring the central horse. He carried a fragment of its sapphire inlay at the time of his death. "And Mr. Murdoch," he added, "seems unnerved whenever the creature is mentioned." Martha's face grew pale. "Do you believe Rowan uncovered something dangerous? Something someone would kill to protect?" Poirot did not answer at once. Instead, he glanced upward as a lantern flickered, casting a wavering glow across the fairground's silent attractions. "I believe, madam," he said eventually, "that Mr. Hawley discovered a truth someone very much wished to keep hidden. A web grows tighter as the fairgrounds emptied and the night deepened." Poirot walked alone beneath the lights, contemplating the strands of the puzzle forming around him. A master artisan dead. A fragment of blue glass clutched tightly in his hand. A carousel rumored to hide secrets. A thief within the fair. Tension between apprentice and handyman. A man who could not meet Poirot's eyes. And Rowan Hale pacing like a hunted creature in the days before his death. These were the first whispers of a deeper truth. Faint but insistent, Poirot paused before the central horse, its carved face serene and unexpectedly haunting in the glow. "What secrets do you hold?" He murmured. The horse, silent and still, offered no reply. But Poirot felt certain that within its sapphire eyes lay the next step in uncovering Rowan Hale's final discovery, and the identity of whoever had stolen not just money, but a man's life. Chapter 3. The Vanishing Ledger by Morning. The fairgrounds looked deceptively innocent. Where the previous night had been marked by shock and hurried whispers, dawn brushed everything with quiet gold. The Ferris wheel loomed still and dignified. The canvas tent stirred faintly with the breeze, and the Sapphire Carousel stood silent, its jeweled details dulled by the pale light, like a stage emptied after the players had departed. Yet beneath this calm surface, Hercule Poirot sensed the tremor of unease running through the fair like a hidden current. Martha Keating met him at the entrance to the main office. Her face, already drawn by grief, now carried an added strain that furrowed her brow and tightened her mouth. "It's gone," she said without preamble. "The ledger, the one that records the fair's earnings." Poirot stepped inside, his eyes sweeping the modest space. The office was practical and uncomplicated. A sturdy desk pushed against the wall, a filing cabinet, 2 chairs, and a safe bolted into the corner. A window overlooked the fairgrounds, its blinds half drawn. Papers were stacked in neat piles, though a few sheets now lay askew, as if disturbed in haste. "The leather-bound volume you showed me yesterday afternoon?" Poirot asked. "Brown, with the brass corners?" "Yes," Martha replied. "I locked it in the drawer of my desk before we closed. I am the only one with the key. This morning, when I came to check the receipts and speak with you, it was gone. And the drawer? Also locked. I had to unlock it myself to discover that the ledger was missing." Poirot moved toward the desk. The drawer slid open smoothly, its interior bare save for a few loose receipts. He examined the lock carefully. No scratches, no splintered wood, no indication of forced entry. "Is anything else missing?" he asked. "Not that I can see," Martha said. "The safe is untouched. The cash from last night is still here. Just the ledger is gone." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. The ledger, then, was the specific target. Someone did not merely wish to steal money. They wished to erase or conceal information. Martha stared at him. "You think this is connected to Rowan? To what he told me about the thefts?" "I think," Poirot said quietly, "that when men commit one crime, they often find it necessary to commit another." He straightened, his gaze drifting toward the door, and paused near the threshold. Where the morning light slanted across the floor, he noticed something faint yet distinct. A narrow trail of dust led from just inside the office outward into the corridor. It was not the ordinary gray of dirt, nor the brown of soil. It had a peculiar hue, a muted yet unmistakable blue. Poirot knelt, his eyes narrowing. He touched a fingertip lightly to the dust and rubbed it, bringing it closer to his sight. Martha watched him anxiously. "What is it?" "Paint," Poirot said. "Fine, like powder. And not just any paint." He rose and held his fingers up for her to see. "This shade," he continued, "is very much like that used for the mane of the central horse on the carousel." Recognition flickered across Martha's face. "Aurora," she murmured. "Rowan was working with that shade all week." "Indeed. And now it leaves us a little path." Poirot's voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "Whoever came here last night carried it with them. On their clothing, perhaps. Or their hands." He followed the trail as it faded down the corridor, growing lighter and less distinct with each step until it vanished altogether, swallowed by the scuffed floors near the side exit. "No forced entry?" he asked. Martha shook her head. "The main doors were locked when I arrived. No windows broken. The side entrance is usually bolted from the inside, but—" She hesitated. "Sometimes, when we are rushed, people come and go through here after closing. It is possible someone forgot to check it." "Possible," Poirot echoed. "And convenient." He turned. His footsteps approached from the hallway outside. Jonah Pike appeared at the doorway, hat in hand, his calm demeanor colored by unease. "Martha," he said quietly, "I heard. About the ledger." "News travels quickly," Poirot remarked. "Word gets around when something like that goes missing," Jonah replied. "Everyone's nerves are frayed after Rowan. This will not help." Poirot studied him. "You came at a fortunate time, Mr. Pike. I was hoping to speak with you again. You are a man who sees much." Jonah shifted, but did not disagree. "I suppose I am. What do you want to know?" "Last night," Poirot said, "after the fair closed, did you see anyone near this office?" There was a brief silence. Jonah glanced at Martha, then back to Poirot. "Yes," he said finally. "I did. Who?" "Carl Murdoch." Martha inhaled sharply. "Carl? What was he doing here?" Jonah shrugged. "I did not ask. I'd finished locking up the ticket booth and was heading past when I saw him by your office door. It was after midnight. He said he was fixing a faulty fuse for the fairground lights." Poirot tilted his head. "Did he carry tools?" "He had his usual belt and a small box," Jonah said. "But I cannot say I saw him handle wires or anything. I did not stay long. I was tired. And you did not think it strange that he was working on fuses near an office rather than near the lights themselves?" Jonah gave a small, regretful sigh. "I thought it odd, perhaps. But I have seen odder things here over the years. People have their ways." Poirot thanked him and dismissed him with a nod. When they were alone again, Martha looked stricken. "You cannot possibly believe Carl would steal from us. He has been with the fair for 10 years. He knows this place better than anyone." Poirot regarded her evenly. "He was seen here after midnight. The ledger is missing. There is no sign of forced entry. These are facts, nothing more. Whether they condemn him, we do not yet know." "But Rowan argued with him," Martha murmured, half to herself. If Carl believed Rowan had discovered the thefts, Poirot lifted a hand. "Let us not leap ahead. The mind that assumes too quickly closes itself to certain possibilities. We will speak with Mr. Murdoch again. Until then, I ask that you tell no one about the paint trail. Let our thief believe their secret is safe." Reluctantly, she agreed. The sky had brightened fully by the time Poirot made his way back to the heart of the fair. A few workers were beginning their morning routines, though the mood was subdued. The carousel remained cordoned off, its stillness an unsettling contrast to its usual promise of motion. Poirot circled it slowly, his gaze tracing the carved horses, the gilded flourishes, the gleaming poles. At the center stood Aurora, the central horse, slightly elevated, its head thrown back in a noble pose. Its mane, painted in deep blue tones with subtle gradients, seemed almost a ripple in the morning light. The eyes, twin sapphires set into the carved face, were dark and reflective, catching hints of the surroundings like secrets. Held in silence, Poirot's attention dropped to the base of the central platform. He had inspected the area in the chaos of the previous night, but then his focus had been on Rowan's body. Now, with time and quiet, He examined it more thoroughly. It did not take long for him to see it. There, near the inner edge of the platform, lay a tiny screw. It was no larger than the nail of his little finger, its threads faintly gleaming, its head slightly worn. Poirot knelt and picked it up delicately. The gap where it belonged was not immediately obvious. The underside of the platform was a maze of supports, mechanisms, and fittings, some original, some added later. He turned the screw between his fingers. Not dropped. He thought. Loosened. He rose and looked once more toward Aurora, his gaze drifting to the sapphire eyes. A faint line ran along the sculpted curve above them, so fine as to be nearly invisible. A seam, a panel, perhaps. He did not touch it. Not yet. To pry into the horse in broad daylight, under the eyes of nervous workers, would be premature. Besides, he had no wish to disturb what might prove essential evidence without proper preparation. Instead, he pocketed the screw and stepped back. Carl Murdoch was found near the base of the Ferris wheel, inspecting its bolts with rehearsed diligence. When Poirot approached, Carl's shoulders tensed. "We've already talked," Carl said. "And we will talk again," Poirot replied calmly. "Circumstances have changed." Carl straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. "What circumstances?" "The ledger is missing," Poirot said. "The one that records the fair's earnings. It disappeared from Martha's office sometime between last night and this morning. You were seen near that office after midnight." Carl's face hardened. "So now I'm a thief as well as a suspect in Rowan's death." "I have called you neither," Poirot said mildly. "I ask only for the truth. You told Mr. Pike you were fixing a faulty fuse. Is that so?" "Yes," Carl snapped. The fairground lights were flickering. "You saw it yourself earlier in the evening." "I traced the problem to a junction near the office corridor. I was working on it. Ask anyone who knows the wiring. It runs through there." Poirot clasped his hands behind his back. "And did you enter the office?" "No, I had no reason to." "Did you notice whether the door was locked?" Carl hesitated. "I did not check." "You did not try the handle? Even by accident?" "No." Poirot watched him carefully. "Mr. Murdoch, you work throughout the grounds. Your clothes carry many traces of that labor. Grease, dust, paint. Tell me, have you worked recently on the central horse of the carousel?" Carl's gaze flickered, just for a moment, toward the Sapphire Carousel behind them. "No," he said. "Rowan made it very clear that Aurora was his domain. He barely let Lily near it, let alone me. Yet there is a trail of blue paint dust," Poirot said, "the very shade used for the horse's mane, leading from inside the office door out into the corridor. Your presence was noted near that same corridor at the same time the ledger likely vanished." Carl's jaw tightened. "You're twisting coincidences into a rope to hang me with." Poirot's voice remained gentle, but his words were precise. "Coincidences, Mr. Murdoch, seldom arrange themselves in such neat patterns. If you are innocent, you should wish to untangle them with complete honesty." For a long moment, Carl said nothing. The creak of the Ferris wheel, distant footsteps, and the soft clatter of tools carried across the fair. "I did not go into the office," Carl said finally, each word forced out. "I fixed the fuse and left. If someone else used the same corridor, that is not my doing." Poirot inclined his head. "Very well. You have answered. For now." He turned and walked away, leaving Carl glowering after him. Later that afternoon, as the clouds gathered in a sullen cluster above the fair, Poirot stood once more before the Sapphire Carousel. Lily approached him quietly, as though reluctant to intrude. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice tentative. "Is it true? About the ledger?" "You hear much, mademoiselle," Poirot said. "But yes, it has vanished." She looked distressed. Rowan believed whoever was stealing from the revenue chests was doing it cleverly, adjusting small amounts, altering figures. The ledger would show that, wouldn't it? "Just so," Poirot said. "It is not the money that damns a thief, but the record of its absence." She glanced at Aurora, her eyes lingering on the sapphire eyes. "Rowan once told me," she said slowly, "that the original builder of the carousel believed in hiding truths where they would be most admired and least examined. He said a piece of a man's soul lives in what he creates. And you believe he found such a truth here? In the horse? Poirot asked. I don't know, Lily whispered. But in the last few days, he became certain that the central horse held something more than just wood and paint. He said once, half joking, that if the carousel could speak, it would testify against someone. Poirot's gaze drifted to the tiny seam above the sapphire eyes, which now seemed to watch him with silent challenge. Then it is time, he said softly, that we persuade it to speak. For now, however, he walked away, leaving the carousel untouched. Its secrets still locked within. He had enough for the moment: a missing ledger, a vanishing trail of paint, a loosened screw beneath the central platform, and a man whose alibi sounded too carefully arranged to be entirely comfortable. The pattern was forming, but there were still pieces missing. And Hercule Poirot was not a man to act before every element had been considered and placed in its rightful position. The fair's lanterns would glow again that evening, and beneath their light, whispers would grow. Soon, the Sapphire Carousel would give up its silence. And when it did, Poirot was certain it would not only illuminate theft, but murder. Chapter 4. Secrets in the sapphire eyes. Clouds drifted across the sky in long, somber streaks as Poirot returned to the Sapphire Carousel that afternoon. The fairgrounds were subdued, the usual bustle softened by a quiet tension that hung in the air like the low hum before a storm. The workers moved about with hushed conversations and wary glances, their steps slower, their voices muted. The death of Rowan Hale had shaken them deeply, and now, with the ledger missing, unease had settled over the fair like a shadow. Poirot felt it too. Not fear, but the undeniable sense that the pieces of the puzzle were beginning, at last, to shift into alignment. He approached Aurora, the central horse, with deliberate steps. The carved creature stood as though frozen mid-stride, head lifted proudly, mane cascading in painted waves. In the mid-afternoon light, the blues and silvers shimmered faintly, though the horse now seemed less magnificent and more enigmatic, as though its artistry had become a mask hiding something far less elegant. Poirot rested a gloved hand gently on the side of the horse's head. His fingers traced the careful contours of the carved cheek, the intricate swirling patterns Rowan had so painstakingly restored. The craftsmanship was superb, but Poirot's interest lay not in artistry, but in truth. And truth, he suspected, lay behind the carved veneer. He leaned forward, examining the twin sapphire eyes. They gleamed with a depth that suggested age and value, or so they appeared at first glance. But Poirot did not rely on first impressions. He removed a small magnifying lens from his pocket and held it to the left eye. The gem was exquisite. Deep blue, cut with precision, and smooth at the edges where it was nestled into the hollow of the wood. It caught the light and fractured it into faint glimmers. Genuine, he thought. Undoubtedly old. Original. He shifted to the right eye dot at once he noticed a difference dot. It was subtle, barely visible to the untrained eye, but to Poirot it was as stark as a beacon. The right gem lacked the depth of the left. Its coloration was uniform, too crisp, and when the light struck it, it did not refract in the same layered way. It also lacked weight. Poirot touched it lightly, and he felt the slight hollowness beneath it. A replica, and not merely a poor one, a deliberate replacement. Poirot stepped back, eyebrows lifting with interest. So, he murmured, someone has tampered with you, my proud friend. Lily Grant approached quietly from behind. She carried a small toolkit, though it hung from her hands as though she had forgotten she held it. Her face was pale, her expression troubled, yet she seemed drawn to Poirot as though compelled. You noticed it too, she said softly. Poirot turned to face her. You were aware the right eye was not original? She nodded. Rowan replaced it 2 days ago. The original was damaged, or so he claimed. But he looked conflicted. Conflicted? Yes. He said the gem had fallen out while he was restoring the mane, but he didn't want anyone else to see it. When I asked why, he told me something I didn't understand at the time. She paused. He said the original jewel wasn't a solid stone at all. Poirot's interest sharpened. He believed it was hollow? Lily nodded again, her voice dropping to a whisper. He said it felt wrong in his hand, too light for its size. He thought it was crafted to open, like a capsule. But he never forced it. He feared damaging the carousel. Poirot absorbed this quietly. It made sense. A hollow jewel, designed to open. An oddity for a carousel ornament, unless it had a purpose. A secret purpose. And if Rowan had attempted to explore that purpose, perhaps he had uncovered something worth killing to conceal. Lily watched him anxiously. Do you think he discovered something inside it? Poirot gestured toward the horse. I think, mademoiselle, that we shall soon find out. He moved around Aurora, studying the saddle, the base, the seams in the wood. The intricate carving served as both decoration and camouflage. A master craftsman could hide a compartment within such patterns easily, especially one intended to be concealed for decades. Poirot knelt beside the saddle, running his fingers along the underside. The wood was smooth, but there, a faint separation in the carving. A line disguised as part of the swirling motif. He pressed gently. The panel shifted. Lily gasped. I never saw that before. Poirot said nothing. He worked carefully, easing the panel open. A small compartment, no larger than a folded handkerchief, lay hidden within the hollow of the horse. Inside, packed tightly and folded crudely, were torn scraps of paper, not many, perhaps a dozen, but enough to form a fragmentary collection. Poirot reached inside and removed them one by one, laying them delicately across his palm. Each piece bore ink, rows of numbers, initials, short columns that appeared incomplete and irregular. Some fragments had torn edges that suggested they had once been bound. Most telling of all, the ink and handwriting matched the ledger he had seen in Martha's office. The missing ledger. Lily stared, her face tightening with dawning horror. Those are records, she whispered. Amounts, names, and those initials. They look like abbreviations of the workers' names. Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. Someone was taking portions of the fair's earnings. Small amounts, no doubt, but over time they would accumulate. Rowan must have discovered discrepancies in the ledger, and then discovered these fragments hidden here. But why hide them in the carousel? Lily asked. Why go to such lengths? Poirot glanced toward the horse's sapphire eyes. Because the carousel is the heart of the fair. It stands in the open where everyone admires it, and therefore where no one truly examines it. What better place to hide a secret than in the center of attention? He carefully studied the fragments. Some initials were familiar. CM for Carl Murdoch, JP for Jonah Pike, LG for Lily Grant. Others included workers Poirot had not yet spoken to, LR and FD, but the amounts varied. In some places, names repeated frequently, followed by small numerical sums. Lily's breath hitched as she leaned closer. Those look like withdrawals, she said. Amounts being taken from the revenue chests. Poirot nodded. Indeed, and these entries matched the style of the missing ledger. Someone was altering the records and hiding the originals here, hiding them inside the carousel, where they assumed even a meticulous artisan would not look. He folded the scraps into a neat stack and slipped them gently into his pocket. Lily swallowed. So the person stealing money was also the person who hid the evidence here. And that person, Poirot said softly, feared Rowan had found it. Lily's eyes widened. Which means, Poirot finished for her. Which means Rowan's death was not a crime of passion nor accident, but a calculated act to silence a man who had uncovered the truth. A faint tremor passed through Lily. Do you know who it is? Poirot's gaze drifted back to the horse's hollow eye socket and a mismatched replica. I believe, he said slowly. I know where the trail leads, but not yet whom it leads to. He stepped back from the carousel, his mind weaving through the threads. A missing ledger, a replaced jewel, illicit earnings hidden inside a masterpiece of craftsmanship. And Rowan Hale, the artisan who had discovered just enough to seal his fate. Lily hesitated, then asked in a trembling voice, What do we do now? Poirot offered her a gentle, reassuring expression. Now, mademoiselle, we gather each clue with precision. We watch. We listen. We allow the guilty to believe their secret is still safe. And then he paused, glancing once more at the silent, regal face of Aurora. We invite them to reveal themselves. Chapter 5. The shadow of Old Debt's reign began as a fine mist over Larkspur, softening the edges of the fairground. By late afternoon, it had settled into a steady drizzle, beating on canvas tents and running in narrow rivulets down the painted sides of the booths. The Sapphire Carousel, cocooned beneath its canopy of lights and carvings, seemed almost removed from the weather, a vivid island surrounded by muted gray. Inside Martha Keating's office, the sound of the rain was a constant. Distant hiss against the window pane. Martha stood by that window now, one hand on the sill, the other wrapped around a mug she had long since stopped drinking from. Her shoulders were hunched, as though she could feel the weight of the entire fair pressing down upon them. Poirot sat in the chair opposite her desk, his posture as precise as ever, his hands lightly folded. On the desk between them lay nothing but a single clean blotter and a brass letter opener. The clutter of papers had been tidied away after the discovery of the missing ledger, as though bare surfaces might somehow soothe frayed nerves. "You said you wished to speak with me privately," Martha said at last, turning from the window. "I suppose this is about the debts." Poirot inclined his head. "You knew it must come to that." "Of course I did." She gave a humorless, weary smile. "Once money goes missing, everyone looks for the hungriest mouth. Right now, that is the fair itself." She sat slowly, placing the cold mug aside. "My husband," she said, "was a dreamer. He loved spectacle. Lights, fireworks, grand attractions. He believed that if we appeared bigger than we were, success would follow. So he borrowed. He invested in improvements. He took risks. Some paid off. Most did not. And you inherited both the fair and its obligations," Poirot said. "Yes, when he died. I was left with contracts I did not fully understand and creditors who had lost patience with his charm. I have spent the last 8 years pulling us back from the edge." Her expression hardened with quiet pride. "We are still in debt, but less so. The Larkspur return was meant to be our turning point. If the fair performed well here and on the next circuit, we could finally bargain for reasonable terms." Poirot considered her carefully. "So you had a powerful motive to ensure the fair showed a profit." "One might say, a temptation. You think I stole from my own fair?" Her voice did not rise, but there was steel in it now. "That I raided the revenue chests and rewrote the ledger?" "I think," Poirot said calmly, "that you had both access and opportunity. You have the keys. You control the accounts. And Rowan Hale told you, on the day of his death, that he had found proof money was being taken." Her hands clenched on the edge of the desk. "I did not touch those chests. I have never falsified the ledger. I have struggled, and I have made compromises in other areas. Cheaper parts, delayed maintenance. But I have not stolen from my own workers." Poirot nodded slowly. "You understand that the fragments I found inside the carousel show a pattern of discrepancies. Small amounts, taken over time. Yet the initials beside some of those figures are not all the same. They suggest a shifting, perhaps even deliberate, confusion." Martha exhaled. "I do not know what to say beyond this. I am not your thief. If you choose not to believe me, I cannot force you. But I will tell you this much. I asked Rowan to check the ledgers because I suspected something was wrong, not because I was hiding it." "You suspected?" "Yes." She hesitated, then continued. "The takings did not quite match what I expected from the crowds. It was a feeling at first, no more. But over the last 2 stops, the figures began to trouble me. Rowan was meticulous, and he trusted the numbers more than anyone. So I asked him to look. I thought perhaps I had miscounted or misjudged the audience. Instead," she gestured helplessly, "instead, he found something. And now he is dead." Silence lingered between them. Poirot studied her face, a face worn by responsibility, lined by worry. If she lied, she did so with skill forged in hardship. But her anger, when accused, had not been theatrical. It had been quiet, controlled, deeply rooted. He filed that away. "Very well, madam," he said gently. "I do not dismiss your words." She gave a small, bleak laugh. That is hardly comfort. No, Poirot agreed. But it is truth for the present. And truth, like credit, grows in time if it is sound. A faint spark of dry amusement touched her eyes despite herself. You sound like someone who has negotiated with bankers. One cannot travel through life without meeting a few, Poirot replied. Now, I must speak with your handyman once more. Martha's mouth tightened. Carl is surly, not subtle. He cuts corners, but I have never known him to be dishonest. Poirot rose. We shall see, madam. Honesty is sometimes hidden beneath a very rough exterior. And sometimes not. The rain had eased to a fine, drifting curtain by the time Poirot found Carl Murdoch in the maintenance shed. The air inside smelled of oil, metal, and wet canvas. Tools lay in organized disarray, wrenches, coils of wire, paint cans with their lids loosely pressed on. Carl stood at a workbench, sanding a wooden plank with more force than was warranted, though he did not look up when Poirot entered. We keep having this conversation, he muttered. I suppose that means I should be worried. Poirot closed the door behind him with a soft click. When men are innocent, they usually welcome the opportunity to clear away suspicion. Carl snorted. You think I care what everyone whispers? They have always whispered. You care what Martha thinks of you, Poirot said quietly. That is different. The sandpaper halted mid-stroke. Carl's jaw flexed. What do you want now? Poirot approached the workbench, his gaze drifting over the tools. We shall not waste each other's time. I know you are in debt. I know a local collector, shall we call him a lender of an informal kind, has been pressing you for a payment. I know you have been taking on side jobs repairing rides privately for cash. And I know you were afraid that if Martha discovered this, it might cost you your position here. Carl's head jerked up. Who told you that? Your fear did, Poirot said. It leaks into every sentence. But others have supplied the details. People in a small town notice who visits whom and at what hour. A man who owes money cannot hide his worry. Carl's shoulders sagged slightly. The hostility in his eyes did not vanish, but it dimmed. Fine, he said. Yes, I owe money. I borrowed for a family matter that did not resolve as I hoped. The collector is not patient. The fare is the only steady work I have. I was not about to risk it. So you mended rides for cash, Poirot said. Did you also mend the ledger? Carl's expression hardened. No, I am not an accountant. I do not touch the chests. I do not touch the books. I earn what I can with my hands. Poirot walked slowly along the workbench, lightly touching a wrench, a chipped mug, a coil of wire. You were seen near the office on the night the ledger went missing. Working on a fuse, Carl said flatly. As I told you, working on a fuse whose housing lies conveniently near a door that you swear you did not try. I did not enter the office, Carl repeated, anger vibrating beneath the words. Believe what you like, but I am no thief. And yet, Poirot said, your initials appear beside some of the diverted amounts in the scraps I found in the carousel. Carl stared at him, genuinely thrown. My initials? Yes, seen. Poirot watched his face. Were you aware you had become a figure in someone's private account? The confusion gave way to fury. If someone is using my name, not your full name, Poirot said. Just letters, convenient, ambiguous. They might stand for anyone. Or no one. That is the trick, you see. If questioned, a thief can always shrug and say, those letters were a shorthand for something else entirely. But you, Mr. Murdoch, must understand how compromising it looks. Carl's fist struck the workbench, rattling tools. This is nonsense. I do not get near the money. I barely get near the people who count it. If someone wants to pin this on me, they will find I am not so easy to frame. Poirot observed him in silence for a moment. You say you feared dismissal, he said. Yet you did not try to steal from the fare, even with the chest so near and your debts pressing. I fix what breaks, Carl growled. I do not steal. Not from the place that keeps me fed. I took on outside work because it did not harm the fare. That is all. Poirot nodded once. Then that is what you must hold to. Truth will defend itself in the end. Carl let out a breath, some of the rage draining away. Is that some sort of comfort? It is what there is, Poirot answered, and left into his tools and his storm of thoughts. Later, in the quiet space behind the carousel, where the rain drummed softly on the canvas canopy, Poirot found Lily Grant. She was seated on a wooden crate, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the polished hooves of one of the carved horses as though they might move and speak. She looked up quickly as he approached. "Have you found something else?" she asked. "In a way, yes," Poirot said. "I have found that everyone in this fair carries a burden. Some are financial. Some are emotional. Some are secrets they have grown used to wearing like a second skin." She shifted uneasily. "That is true of anywhere, is it not?" "Perhaps," Poirot agreed. "But here, those burdens intersect with theft and death. That gives them a sharper edge." Lily's eyes flicked toward Aurora, the central horse, visible through a gap in the canvas. "You think one of us killed Rowan because of the ledger?" "I think someone killed Rowan because he threatened to expose them," Poirot replied. "The ledger was only the instrument of their fear." Her gaze dropped. He watched her for a moment, then said, "Tell me, Miss Grant, why do you fear the ledger?" Her head snapped up. "I do not—" Poirot cut her off gently. "When I mentioned it this morning, you grew defensive. You changed the subject quickly. Yet, as Rowan's apprentice, you would have been the least likely to manage the accounts. Why should a book of numbers trouble you?" Lily's lips pressed into a tight line. She stared at the ground. "He would not accept you," Poirot said quietly, "even after all your years of work." She flinched, though he had not moved closer. He said, "I was not ready. Do you agree with him?" After a long pause, she whispered, "No." Poirot's voice was mild. "You resented him for that." "I devoted 4 years to this fair," Lily burst out suddenly. 4 years to his craft. I learned every curve of these horses, every technique he used. I sanded, painted, carved under his direction. And still whenever Martha asked if I was ready to be listed as a full carver, he refused. Always another test. Always another condition I had not yet met. Anger put color in her cheeks now, and her hands balled into fists against her arms. "I do not deny his talent," she said. "But he held power over my future. He knew it. He used it. If I left, I had no certificate, no formal endorsement. Without his word, my work would always be viewed as a hobbyist's efforts. He knew that, and still he kept it from me." Poirot listened, not interrupting. And then, Lily continued, voice shaking, "This last week he became more secretive than ever. He sent me away from the central horse. He worked late, refused to share his plans. When I asked what he was doing, he said it was beyond my current abilities. As though I were a child. There was more than professional disappointment," Poirot said gently. "There was bitterness." She looked away quickly. "I did not wish him dead, if that is what you are implying. I am angry, yes, but I am not a monster." "I did not say that you are," Poirot replied. "I merely observe that when a man holds both knowledge and authority, and chooses to withhold them, he breeds resentment around him. Resentment is not murder, but it can cloud what people are willing to admit." She swallowed. "What does any of this have to do with the ledger?" "Your initials appear among the fragments," Poirot said. She stared at him. "Mine?" "Yes. LG beside some figures. There is such a notation. Again, it could stand for many things. It could be completely innocent, or it could be intended to confuse. The thief may have sprinkled initials to muddy the trail, to create suspicion against several instead of one." Her face had gone very still. "I did not touch the ledger. I only knew Rowan was reviewing it because Martha asked him. I never saw the inside of it. If my initials are there, then someone else put them." "The question," Poirot said, "is whether that someone was Rowan himself, recording who received what, or another hand altogether, recording lies." Lily's breath trembled. "You think Rowan could have been involved in this? That he could have been stealing?" "I think Rowan discovered something," Poirot said. "Whether he had a role in it before or not, I do not yet know. But I do not see in his behavior the pattern of one who profits quietly. I see the agitation of a man who has uncovered rot in something he loves. She nodded slowly, as if relieved and yet more unsettled. Still, Poirot added softly, he made you dependent on his approval. That dependency, Miss Grant, shapes how you remember events, how you interpret his secrecy. She looked at him sharply, then away. What would you have done? Poirot asked. If he had finally refused to certify you? If he had told you he never intended to put your name on any piece of paper that would free you? Her answer came quickly, but not convincingly. I would have left. Yes, Poirot said. But would you have left quietly? She did not reply. He let the silence sit between them for a few seconds, then eased it aside with a gentler tone. Whether you admit it or not, you held anger toward Rowan Hale, as did Carl for different reasons. As did Martha, perhaps, for his insistence on costly perfection when the fair struggled to afford it. Even Jonah Pike disliked his intensity. Each of you carried cause to resent him. Each of you had reason to fear what he might reveal once he uncovered the thefts. But only one of us killed him, Lily murmured. Poirot tilted his head. Just so. And only one of you saw in Rowan's discovery a danger so great that it outweighed the stain of blood. Debts, ambition, pride, these are powerful forces. But they do not always lead to murder. For that, there must be something more. A secret that cannot survive sunlight. He looked toward the carousel again. The rain had softened, and a stray gleam of light caught the artificial sapphires, making them glow faintly. I do not yet know whose secret that is, Poirot said. But I will. He straightened, his expression thoughtful. Tell me one last thing, Miss Grant. On the day Rowan replaced the sapphire eye, did he show you where he kept the original? She blinked. No. He wrapped it in the cloth and slipped it into his satchel. I assumed he intended to examine it later, perhaps see if it could be repaired. I never saw it again. Poirot nodded. Then somewhere, there is a hollow jewel that once belonged to this carousel, and whatever it contained may still exist, unless the thief has destroyed it. Lily shivered. Do you think the jewel holds something worse than the scraps you found in the compartment? I think, Poirot said, that the jewel is the first place our thief would have thought to check, and the scraps in the saddle were the second. He left her then, alone with the carved horses and her thoughts. That evening, as the fair's lights flickered on one by one, Poirot walked slowly along the main path, hands behind his back, mind quietly turning. Martha, bound by the weight of old debts and the need to keep the fair alive. Carl, cornered by a dangerous creditor and implicated by circumstance near the office door. Lily, straining against the limits imposed by a mentor who refused to endorse her, her future hanging on the stroke of another's pen. Jonah, with his calm eyes and habit of watching everything from the edges. Each carried shame. Each carried fear. Each carried a piece of the puzzle. But only one had a secret that could not survive exposure. A secret so entangled with the missing ledger, with the hidden scraps, with the hollow jewel, that Rowan Hale's discovery had sealed his fate. Poirot felt it like a faint change in the air. Before a storm, that subtle shift when possibility begins to narrow towards certainty. The time for quiet observation was nearing its end. Soon, he would need to draw the net tighter, and when he did, the one who had moved in the shadows of the fair, tampering with books and jewels and lives, would find themselves very suddenly in the light. Chapter 6. Night ride on the carousel. The sky had deepened into a velvety blue by the time Hercule Poirot requested the fair be closed for the night. The last visitors drifted reluctantly toward the gates, their silhouettes merging with the growing darkness. The workers, uneasy and subdued, packed up their booths under the watchful eyes of lanterns that flickered in the damp evening air. Martha Keating complied with Poirot's request without argument. She instructed the crew to lock the grounds and keep everyone away from the Sapphire Carousel unless summoned directly by the detective. When the gates finally clanged shut, a hush fell over Larkspur Fair, a stillness that felt almost unnatural after the usual din of crowds and music. Poirot waited until the last footsteps faded. Then he stepped closer to the carousel, its carved horses gleaming faintly beneath the overhead lanterns. Without the usual sounds of laughter, machinery, and chatter, the fair seemed transformed, eerie, expectant, and somehow more honest. The detective inhaled slowly. This was how he preferred it. Silence, a stage cleared of distractions, allowing the whispers of clues to speak clearly. He approached the main junction box and switched on the power. The carousel lights blinked alive, one by one, casting warm halos of brightness. The machinery let out a low, steady hum that vibrated through the wooden platform like a giant creature awakening from slumber. Poirot placed a gloved hand upon Aurora's polished flank. "Now," he murmured, "let us see what secrets you still hold." The carousel turns with a controlled motion. Poirot activated the carousel's rotation. Slowly at first, the platform began to turn. The horses glided past in a graceful procession, their shadows merging and parting as though choreographed. Aurora, positioned slightly elevated in the center, remained stationary, as was customary for some classic carousel designs, where the central horse served as a focal symbol rather than a mount. Poirot walked with measured steps, keeping pace with the turning platform, watching, listening. He observed the way the internal gears shifted beneath the boards, the faint clicking of mechanisms aligning, and the occasional tremble of pieces slightly out of place. After a full rotation, he approached the maintenance access panel on the inner rim. Rowan had last worked here and died near here. Poirot's fingers grazed the latch. He opened the panel. A cool draft drifted out, carrying the faint scent of aged wood and varnish. The interior hummed with life as gears turned slowly, shining with fresh oil. Poirot crouched low, peering into the shadowed cavity beneath the platform. There, a shape that did not belong. A flat wooden board. Slightly lifted, Poirot eased himself lower. Lights from the carousel casting a golden halo across the interior. His hand found the board easily. It shifted with a soft scrape. Beneath it lay a narrow cavity, intentionally carved, expertly hidden. Inside waited the rest of the ledger pages. Not torn, not crumpled, not discarded, but arranged neatly in order, aligned with careful precision as though waiting for a reader. Poirot's breath slowed. "So," he whispered, "you were not hiding destruction. You were preserving truth." He removed the pages with exquisite care and examined them beneath the lantern's glow. The entries were meticulous, Rowan's neat handwriting documenting inconsistencies in earnings. Dates circled in red pencil, entire columns marked with X's. He had been reconstructing the hidden transactions, rebuilding the missing pieces, following the trail with the patience of a craftsman. It was a ledger of two halves, the false record kept in Martha's office, and the secret one someone had begun crafting long before. Rowan uncovered it. And Rowan had brought the halves together, which meant someone else had finished what he started. Poirot rose from the cavity, eyes sharp. The killer was not destroying the ledger, he murmured. They were completing it. Fingerprints in the varnish. Poirot replaced the board and stood, letting the carousel continue its slow turn. He walked along the inner edge once more, scanning every joint, every seam, every brustrok near Aurora's saddle. He noticed something he had missed earlier. On the polished surface, just beneath the curve where Rowan had applied a final coat of varnish, faint impressions marred the glossy finish. At first glance, they might have looked like random streaks, but Poirot recognized them at once. Fingerprints. Cluster of small, deliberate prints pressed into drying varnish. Not smeared, not accidental, but precise, as though the person handling the horse had done so with care rather than haste. Poirot leaned closer, lifting the magnifying lens to inspect the subtle ridges. These were not the broad, rough marks of Carl Murdoch, nor the long-fingered, heavy-handed prints of Jonah Pike. They were delicate, light, someone accustomed to detail work. Someone who touched the carousel not as a mechanic or a laborer, but as a craftsperson, a carver. Poirot exhaled softly. Lily Grant. Yet he did not leap to conclusions. Fingerprints on public craftsmanship proved only proximity, not guilt. He needed intent, opportunity, a pattern that fit the careful handling of evidence and the completed puzzle beneath the platform. But the size and placement of the prints suggested something more. The hands that had touched the varnish were familiar with the wood, comfortable with its curves. Unafraid to lean close, someone who knew the carousel intimately, Poirot reached up and gently touched the replica's sapphire eye. It lacked the cold weight of the original. Its placement sat slightly off balance. Whoever had replaced it had been nervous or hurried, but the varnish prints were calm, intentional. Two different acts, two different states of mind. Interesting. He circled the horse again, observing the join where the compartment behind the saddle had been. The panel had been handled with ease, suggesting whoever accessed it knew its mechanism well. Perhaps Rowan had shown someone, or perhaps someone had simply been watching him. The carousel continued its gentle turn, music silenced, yet motion steady. Poirot considered the implications. Someone had collected the torn pages Rowan found. Someone had added the remaining sheets. Someone had arranged them neatly beneath the platform. Someone had waited, watching Rowan follow the trail. Someone had known exactly when Rowan was closest to exposing them. The killer hadn't destroyed the ledger. They had curated it. They had organized the evidence in a way Rowan never got to finish. The meaning of Poirot stepped off the carousel and let it continue turning without him. He walked in slow circles, the lanterns above casting shifting halos of gold and silver. Someone who cared about the order of things. Someone who could not tolerate a puzzle left incomplete. Someone who found comfort in structure, in arrangement, in the neat alignment of truths, even illicit ones. Someone who feared disorder, chaos, or discovery enough to ensure that Rowan's work did not die with him. Poirot's thoughts returned to Lily Grant's words earlier. He said the central horse was beyond my ability. He kept secrets. Even from me. He never certified me. He held power over my future. And, perhaps most telling, if my initials are in the ledger, someone else put them there. Perhaps. Or perhaps the initials represented not recipients but participants, those whose earnings were altered, whose presence was required to access locked spaces, whose roles offered the perfect cover. But Poirot was not ready to decide. He continued inspecting the machinery, the interior beams, the shadows beneath the carved platform. More faint prints, more signs of delicate handling. Someone who worked close to the wood, not hovering distantly. He paused beside the central. Pulled out, yes, there barely. Visible were faint traces of the same varnish. On the metal clamp securing the platform, someone had steadied themselves here the night Rowan died. Yet Carl's fingerprints would be different. Martha's hands calloused in different ways. Jonah's soft, unhurried touch bore no resemblance to these small, precise impressions. Poirot reached into his pocket, touching the folded ledger fragments and the tiny screw he had found earlier. A puzzle of numbers. A puzzle of craftsmanship. A puzzle of pride, resentment, and fear. And someone with a need to arrange, to finish, to perfect. The carousel slows. Poirot returned to the control panel and switched off the mechanism. Slowly, gracefully, the carousel came to a halt. The horses stopped mid-motion, their frozen expressions catching the golden glow of the lanterns. Poirot stood before Aurora, the central horse, hands clasped lightly behind his back. "You have shown me much tonight," he said quietly. More than anyone intended. He reached out and touched the horse's cheek. The killer did not fear the ledger. They feared incompleteness. Rowan uncovered part of the pattern. His death preserved what they believed they needed to hide. Yet they could not bear to leave his work unfinished. He stepped back, brows furrowed delicately. It is not destruction they fear. It is exposure. "And now," he whispered, "you have exposed them." A distant rumble of thunder echoed across the fairgrounds. Poirot turned away from the carousel and walked slowly toward the exit. He now understood the killer's mind. Not a brute. Not a thief seeking only gain. But a careful, meticulous hand, one who lived not in chaos, but in precision. One who feared Rowan because Rowan saw patterns. Because Rowan worked slowly, methodically. Because Rowan was closing in. Poirot paused at the edge of the fairgrounds and looked back at the glowing carousel, its lights swaying faintly in the wind. "The truth," he murmured, "is nearly complete. Chapter 7. The gathering among the Fairlight's lanterns were lit early that evening, their golden glow softening the edges of the rain-damp canvas as Martha prepared the largest tent for Poirot's request. Workers gathered reluctantly, drawn by fear, suspicion, and the solemn weight of Rowan Hale's death. The air inside the tent felt charged, a mingling of damp canvas, nervous breath, and the faint electrical tang of lantern wires warming. Poirot stood at the center of the space, facing the semicircle of somber faces. Martha Keating, pale but steady. Carl Murdoch, arms folded, jaw tight. Jonah Pike, expression unreadable behind his pipe, lit though he did not smoke it. Lily Grant, her hands wrung tightly together, standing just slightly apart from the others. Behind them, through the open flap of the tent, the Sapphire Carousel flickered beneath the night sky, its blue and gold lights pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Poirot lifted his hand, and the murmurs ceased. "My friends," he began, his voice calm yet resonant, "we gather tonight not to cast blame in anger, nor to search blindly in the dark. We gather to illuminate the truth, as Rowan Hale sought to do in his final days." Martha's breath caught, though she held her composure. Poirot continued. Rowan believed the Sapphire Carousel contained something it was never meant to hide. He believed the central horse, Aurora, held a mystery. And he was correct. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Poirot allowed the silence to settle, then stepped forward. In the course of his restoration, Rowan discovered that one of the sapphire eyes was not merely a jewel. It was a container, a hollow vessel, crafted decades ago, with a hinge so delicate only a skilled artisan would detect it. Lily closed her eyes. "It once held a miniature scroll," Poirot said. "A tightly rolled record, nearly invisible, handwritten in microscopic lettering. A record of revenue diversions, small sums removed from the fair's earnings over the course of many months. Each entry carefully dated, each amount meticulously noted." Jonah Pike lowered his pipe at last. "It was not possible to read these figures with ease," Poirot continued. "The writing was too small, too compressed." But Rowan was patient. He began copying the contents into the ledger, transferring the hidden entries into a clear, readable form. Martha whispered, "He never told me the scroll existed. He meant to verify its meaning first," Poirot said gently. He was on the verge of uncovering the pattern. He turned slowly, his gaze sweeping across the assembled workers. "Now, consider this. Who among you could have opened such a jewel without cracking it? Who knew Rowan's schedule intimately, the times he worked alone, the intervals when he left Aurora unattended?" Several gazes shifted, inevitably, toward Lily Grant. Poirot moved no closer to her, but his voice softened. "There is more. Last night, beneath the carousel, I found a second hidden space one Rowan had only begun to search. Inside, I found the remaining torn pages of the ledger. They were arranged with care. Not discarded, not damaged, arranged." Carl muttered, "That doesn't sound like someone covering their tracks." "No," Poirot agreed. "It sounds like someone completing Rowan's work." He lifted his chin slightly. "And then there is the varnish." A flicker of fear crossed Lily's face. Fresh varnish was applied to Aurora only days ago, Poirot said. Yet on the underside of the saddle, on the panel that conceals the compartment, there are fingerprints pressed into the drying coat. They are precise, delicate prints, not the rough hands of a mechanic, nor the broad fingers of a ticket keeper. Jonah Pike's expression tightened. "They are the prints of someone who works close to the wood," Poirot said. "Someone who holds the carving tools, sands the curves, and applies varnish with practiced care." His eyes met Lily's. "They are your fingerprints, Miss Grant." A tense, whip-like silence snapped through the tent. Lily's face crumpled. She tried to speak, but the words broke in her throat. Tears spilled down her cheeks, her breath coming fast and irregular. I didn't mean," she's T-A-M-E-R-E-D. Martha stepped forward, voice catching with emotion. "Lily, what did you do?" Lily covered her face with her hands. "I wasn't stealing. I swear I wasn't stealing anything." Poirot waited. He did not interrupt. He let the storm of her panic crest. Through tears, Lily forced out more words. I found the scraps Rowan had hidden. I pieced them together because he wasn't finished. He hadn't completed the record. I thought if I helped him, if I proved myself useful, he might finally trust me, finally see me as more than a child. Carl muttered under his breath. Pride'll twist a person's head. Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. You handled the central horse. You opened the compartment. You touched the jewels. You placed the torn pages in the second hiding space. Lily nodded frantically. Yes, but only to keep them safe. I was trying to protect Rowan's work, not steal from him. I thought if I figured out who was taking money from the fair, maybe Rowan would certify me. Maybe he'd finally recognize me. Poirot regarded her with a long, quiet thoughtfulness. You wish to prove your worth, he said softly. But the truth you hide, the one that weighs heavily still, is not about your ambition. Lily froze. It is about the night Rowan died. A gasp swept through the tent. Lily's sobbing stopped abruptly, as though cut with a knife. She stared at Poirot, her tear-streaked face drained of color. Poirot spoke gently, almost sadly. You say you only wish to return what was stolen. But your silence, the trembling of your hands, the fear in your eyes, all tell me that you are concealing more than diligence and good intention. Carl stepped forward, scowling. You think she killed Rowan? Poirot raised a hand. No. If Miss Grant had committed murder, she would not have sorted the ledger. She would have destroyed it outright. Her actions were marked by care, not malice. A ripple of relief and confusion passed through the group. Poirot turned back to Lily. But you know something, he said softly. Something that terrifies you. Lily's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Poirot stepped closer, not as accuser, but as confidant. What you fear, he murmured, is not that you will be blamed. It is that speaking the truth will bring something even worse into the light. Lily shook her head weakly, her expression a mixture of despair and dread. I can't say it. Then, Poirot replied calmly, you must decide whether continued silence will protect you or destroy you. For the first time, Lily faltered entirely. Her knees weakened. She sank into a nearby chair, staring at her trembling hands as though seeing them for the first time. The lanterns flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the tent's canvas walls, and in the center of them stood Poirot, unmistakably certain that the final truth, the darkest truth, was fast approaching. But it would not come from Lily Grant. Not yet. Not entirely. He knew now who the killer was. And soon, the entire fair would know as well. Chapter 8. Truth on the turning carousel. A hush fell over the lantern-lit tent. The air seemed to tighten, as though the canvas walls themselves leaned inward to hear Poirot's final words. Lily Grant sat motionless, her face drained of color. Martha stood behind her chair, fingers trembling against its back. Carl and Jonah shifted uneasily among the gathered workers. Outside, the Sapphire Carousel glowed through the tent flaps, its stillness almost expectant. Poirot stepped forward, eyes bright with the precise calm that always preceded his grand conclusions. Now, he said softly, we shall complete the circle. Just as Rowan Hale sought to complete his ledger, he turned to Lily. Miss Grant, you helped Rowan with the restoration. You observed his habits. You knew when he worked alone and when he left Aurora unattended. You handled the varnish and the compartments, leaving your fingerprints. You, more than anyone here, had the skill to open the hollow sapphire eye without damaging it. Lily's lips parted as though to deny it, but no words formed. Poirot continued, his tone gentle but unstoppable. But these things alone do not make you a killer. What is his motive? A motive born not from greed, but from fear. A desperate fear. He looked at Martha, then back at Lily. You were the first to notice the inconsistencies in the fair's finances, Poirot said. You saw the strain Martha was under. You admired her, perhaps even loved her, as the mother you did not have in this place. Martha blinked, startled. And so, Poirot went on, you began forging small entries in the ledger, adjusting figures. Not to steal, but to conceal. To hide the fair's declining profits. To spare Martha the humiliation of failure, and to protect your own place here. Lily stiffened, tears rising anew. I was trying to help," she whispered. "Yes," Poirot said kindly. "But help offered in secrecy becomes deception. And deception always demands more." When Rowan began reviewing the accounts, he found the inconsistencies at once. His mind was disciplined, precise. He saw the pattern of forgery taking shape. Carl muttered. Rowan never missed a detail. "Exactly," Poirot said. "He confronted Lily the night of his death. He accused her of falsifying entries. He feared that if the truth emerged, the fair's reputation would be ruined, and she would drag Martha down with her." Martha stumbled back as if struck. "No," she whispered. "Lily. Tell him this isn't true." But Lily's tears flowed freely, her breath trembling. Poirot knelt slightly to meet her eyes. "Rowan told you he would expose everything," he said softly. He had already copied the miniature scroll from the sapphire eye. He had gathered the torn scraps. He intended to go to Martha. He panicked. Lily shook her head weakly. "I didn't mean to. I wasn't." "You tried to stop him," Poirot said, voice quiet. "You reached for him, perhaps to pull the ledger pieces from his hands." Rowan stepped back, angry, perhaps disgusted. And then Poirot paused. "You pushed." A horrified murmur swept the tent. "It was not premeditated," Poirot said. "Not murder planned in cold blood. But in panic and fear, Miss Grant gripped by desperation, you shoved him." He stumbled against the carousel steps. He fell. His head struck the edge of the wood. Lily covered her mouth as a sob tore free. "I didn't know," she cried. "I didn't know it would kill him. I only wanted him to stop to give me time, just time." Poirot rose. "When you saw he was dead," he continued, "you were overcome by terror. You feared Martha would be ruined. You feared you would be despised by the fair you loved. And so, you acted again in secrecy." He placed a hand gently on the back of Lily's chair. "You hid the ledger pieces inside the compartments you knew how to open. You replaced the sapphire eye with a replica, believing the legend of its curse would frighten others away. You arranged the torn pages beneath the platform, completing Rowan's work in a twisted attempt to honor him while protecting yourself." Lily sobbed uncontrollably now. Martha knelt beside her, stricken. "Oh, Lily," Martha whispered. "Why didn't you tell me?" Lily tried to speak, but her words broke. "I thought I was helping you. I thought if Rowan didn't reveal everything, if the fair had one more chance." Her voice dissolved. Poirot stepped back, letting the weight of his reconstruction settle among them. The local constable, who had stood silently near the tent's edge, stepped forward. "Miss Grant," he said softly, "I'm afraid you must come with me." Lily nodded numbly. She did not resist. As she was gently led from the tent, Martha reached out and clasped her hand briefly, a gesture filled with heartbreak, rather than condemnation. When Lily disappeared into the night, the workers dispersed in somber silence, leaving only Martha and Poirot beneath the glow of the lanterns. "She was trying to protect me," Martha whispered, staring at the empty tent flap. "All this time she thought she was saving the fair." Poirot bowed his head. "Devotion," he said, "is a powerful force. It can inspire great acts of loyalty and great acts of folly." Martha wiped her eyes. "I will rebuild the fair. But this time, honestly. No more secrets. No more shadows." "That," Poirot said, "is the wisest choice." They stepped out of the tent. The rain had stopped. A clear moon gleamed high above the fairgrounds, casting silver reflections across the puddles. The sapphire carousel shimmered softly, its lights still glowing. At Poirot's suggestion, Martha switched it on. The carousel turned, slowly at first, then with its familiar graceful rhythm. One by one, the horses swept past Aurora at the center, its sapphire eyes shining once more in calm. Quiet dignity. Poirot watched the motion, the symmetry, the return of order. "So many secrets," Martha murmured. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "But secrets," he said, "much like jewels, lose their power when brought into the light." He turned away, his coat catching the lantern glow, and walked slowly into the night as the carousel continued its steady spin, its mysteries at last put to rest.